From Colby Covington's inflammatory remarks about Kamaru Usman to John Jones's brutal taunting of Daniel Cormier's weight and personal life, here are the top 5 worst attempts at trash talk in UFC history. Let's start with Colby Covington. This loudmouth featherweight fighter is no stranger to controversies. He's the kind of guy who's managed to have a beef with literally every other fighter in his division, including the former interim lightweight title holder Dustin Poirier. Colby's actually pretty well known for his insensitive comments. His fans like to defend him, saying that he's just playing a character to garner a following, which will ultimately lead to bigger paychecks and better deals and opportunities in his career. Either way, some of the things he says can be way out of pocket. His rivalry with Kamaru Usman is one of the most dreaded feuds in recent times. The two fighters have had their fair share of back and forth with one another. However, ever since his defeat at UFC 245, the American mixed martial artist has rebranded himself as Colby Covington 2.0. Chaos has since taken his trash talk to a whole new level. He leaves no door for apologies or amends. The fighter's here to burn bridges. Before his brutal loss at UFC 245, Covington made a number of controversial comments that were seen as racist and insensitive. He got into a heated argument with his opponent, Kamaru Usman, and slammed the fighter for his Nigerian roots. Colby has also called Kamaru's hometown a hole. He went on to make derogatory comments about Kamaru's religion and his status as an immigrant. Yikes, Colby! He ended up losing that fight via technical knockout in the 5th round. And I gotta say, I think he deserved it. Chaos definitely needed to be humbled. I mean, that's not the only time he crossed a line with his trash talk. One time he said that he'd beat Dustin Poirier so much that his wife would divorce him. That's just insane. He also made a couple of distasteful remarks about former champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk. The welterweight contender ended up breaking the American top 10 team owner's zero-tolerance policy on trash-talking with training partners, which led him to being kicked out of the gym. He called the Polish mixed martial artist ugly and washed up, which was just a failed attempt at trash-talking her. This was when her fight for the women's strawweight championship was coming up, and she was all set to fight Zhang Weili. After Joanna lost that fight, Colby once again slammed her and said some pretty mean stuff. He said that the Polish fighter wanted him to apologize, so he was sorry that her face got rearranged, and insinuated that he got rich and made a Rolex off Joanna Jędrzejczyk's. That's just stupid. Covington's comments were extremely disrespectful towards one of the best women fighters in UFC history. Joanna scaled the heights of a number of divisions and continues to be a prominent ambassador for the mixed martial arts. Colby is pretty bad when it comes to trash talk, but he's nowhere near as terrible as Georges St. Pierre. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all love GSP, right? He's an incredible role model, and he's great in the octagon. It's not his fault, he's just bad at smack talk. One good thing about him, though, is that he doesn't let trash talk ruffle his feathers. Maybe that's one of the reasons why he's not good at it himself. The welterweight GOAT prefers to keep things cordial at most times, but we all know the exchange of harsh words is sometimes inevitable when it comes to MMA. While he almost never really truly gets angry, there was one instance where GSP tried to engage in some pre-fight trash talk, and oh boy, did it backfire on him. Before his fight with Nick Diaz at UFC 158 in 2013, George tried to get under Nick's skin. He mocked his opponent's speech patterns and accused him of being disrespectful to the other fighters in the sport. Although the animosity and tension between the two fighters was so thick that you could cut it with a knife, both of them were thought to be two sides of the same coin. Nick remained unfazed by the Canadian fighter's attempts to humiliate him and took it as motivation to train harder. He saw his opponent as a spoiled and overhyped champion, whereas Nick reminded George of his childhood bullies. The American MMA fighter really got to GSP, to the point that he aggressively told Nick that he'd see him on Saturday if he wasn't scared of him. He was visibly irritated and went as far as calling Diaz an uneducated fool. It was obvious that he was irritated. The verbal yelling match between the two escalated, and tensions were running high. We were finally seeing a side of GSP that not even Josh Koscheck brought out over a few weeks of bullying on the set threat of the Ultimate Fighter. Anyway, fight night finally came around, and George ended up winning via unanimous decision. But his attempts at trash talk were widely criticized and seen as out of character, especially as he was one of the most cordial and respectful professional fighters out there. This incident showed a rare side of GSP's personality that we hadn't seen before. Either way, GSP's attempt at trash talk was kind of pathetic, if I'm being honest. But he's not the only one. Michael Bisping versus Jorge Rivera. The two fighters already had a heated rivalry going on before their fight at UFC 127. This show featured one of the worst instances of trash talk I've ever seen in the UFC. But before fight night came around, Jorge put out a video clip where he was making fun of Michael's accent. He even roasted the Count about his previous losses. El Conquistador also made a number of insulting comments about Rivera's looks and personal life. It wasn't pretty. He even mocked his opponent's wife. I mean, who does that? He was definitely hitting below the belt, and Michael knew it. As a response, he uploaded a mocking video himself, where he was pretending to urinate on a picture of Rivera. Oh man, that was really disgusting. Have these guys ever heard of decorum? When the fight finally took place, Bisping took the fight to the canvas and delivered a bunch of illegal knees to Jorge's head while they were on the ground. Despite the illegal strikes, Michael was awarded the victory via technical knockout in the second round. He continued to roast and mock Rivera even after the fight was over, and he even spit at him from a distance. The MMA community hated this incident, and it was widely condemned by all. Michael Bisping was later fined and suspended for his actions, so at least he got what he deserved. One fighter who didn't get what they deserved was Jon Jones. The feud between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier is one of the most engaging beefs in UFC history. They've been throwing barbs and insults at each other for a couple of years now. The trash talk session between Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier before their bout at UFC 182 was pretty intense. The former Olympic wrestler called Jones the fakest person and said that he actually admired how fake he could be. He was seen as the biggest threat to Jon's light heavyweight crown, and it was obvious both the fighters hated each other. During a press conference, Jones called DC a bum and took a shot at his wrestling credentials. Things escalated, and the two rivals got into a physical altercation where Jon pushed Cormier, who responded by throwing a punch at Bones. Their trash talk continued right up until the fight itself, where Jones ended up winning the bout.
All the negativity, all the discouraging things that were said, I love you guys too, because you guys motivated me and pushed me to just keep fighting.
And that, folks, are the worst attempts at trash talk in UFC history.
Jon Bones Jones!
Last thing.
The greatest